My name is Georgie Head and I am Naturetrek's Tailormade Manager. Now, for those of you who don't know about our Tailormade department, we are really the bespoke private arm of Naturetrek. So if you've ever wanted to do one of our group tours, but perhaps the dates didn't work for you, or you wanted to just go as a couple or an individual even, or even as a family or a group of friends, then that's where Tailormade can really help. So we can offer very similar itineraries to our group tours, but we can also offer holidays to other destinations, other national parks that we might not get a chance to visit on our group tours, or even different countries that we don't visit on our group tours. So if there's a specific species you want to see, or if you want to focus on photography, or if you're just looking for something a little bit different, then please do get in touch with us and our Tailormade team, as we'd be happy to help. I'd also encourage you to take a look at the new Tailormade section on our website, or you might even like to order a copy of our Tailormade brochure, which hopefully should provide you with plenty of ideas and inspiration. But that's enough about Tailormade. This evening, I am going to focus on Uganda and Rwanda, which are two countries that I know particularly well. So Naturetrek don't currently offer any group holidays to Rwanda. We offer two group holidays to Uganda. So that's what I will primarily focus on this evening during my presentation. But at the end, I will quickly go over Rwanda and the differences between the two countries. And of course, we'd be happy to organise a tailor-made holiday if you are interested in visiting Rwanda. So as you can see here, Uganda is a landlocked country. It's got borders to Ethiopia, Kenya, Tanzania, and Rwanda. And it combines really well with all of those destinations if you're looking for a longer safari holiday. So these are all the national parks that we will visit on our group holidays to Uganda. We offer two holidays, as I mentioned earlier, our In Search of the Shoebill, which is our birding tour, a 9-day birding tour, and our Mammals and Mountains, which is our mammal-focused holiday, which is 11 days long. So both of them follow a very similar route, going in an anti-clockwise direction across sort of the southwest of Uganda, as you can see here. The main difference between the two being that our birding tour doesn't visit Bwindi as standard. But that's not to say that if you are a birder, you're necessarily going to have to miss out on the gorillas at Bwindi. We can easily organise an extension for you if that's of interest. So both of our tours start here in Entebbe. It's not actually the capital of Uganda, but it is where the international airport is located. So we'll spend one night in Entebbe. We might visit the botanical gardens, where there's some great birding to enjoy just on the shores of Lake Victoria. So it's a lovely relaxed start to the holiday, but we'll be up very early the following morning to start our journey to the Mbamba swamps. Now, this is what we'll be searching for during our time in Mbamba. This is the shoebill stork. So these incredibly impressive birds stand at around 3 to 5 foot tall. They're incredibly rare throughout Africa, and Mbamba really offers our best chance of seeing them. They occur in the swamps, and we will take them out some dugout canoes to go and see the shoebill. But we won't stick around for too long, as we will then continue on with our journey to Lake Mburo. So I thought I'd briefly just mention the vehicles that we travel in during our holidays to Uganda. There are quite a lot of road journeys involved in all of our group holidays, and indeed in any holiday that you'll take to Uganda. So it's really important that we have comfortable vehicles, and these Land Cruisers are brilliant for that. But they will also double up as our safari vehicles, and they've got these great pop-top roofs so that when we are out on safari, we can get a 360 view, and they're great for photography. Our Uganda tours are also capped at just 6 participants, so that means that everybody will get a window seat on the tour, and it also helps create a really nice tight-knit group. You'll get to know your guide really well, he will get to know your key interests. And so that's a really nice highlight of a tour to Uganda as well. So as I mentioned, we will continue on to Lake Mburo, which is around a 5-hour drive west of Entebbe. And Lake Mburo is so named for its largest lake. It's actually got 14 crater lakes in the park, and we'll make good use of those during our time in Uganda. We'll go on boating safaris in search of species such as this African finfoot, which is a wonderful bird. We might see some Sitatunga antelopes, which are very shy, elusive antelopes that we'll see sort of on the margins of the water. This will also be our only opportunities to see zebra in Uganda. You can only find them in Lake Mburo, and equally you can only find impala in Lake Mburo. And we can take walking safaris during our time here. This is the only park where we will be able to enjoy walking safaris, and that's something really nice to do after the long flights particularly. We'll also take some night drives in search of species such as this African scops owl. And in the evenings, we will go out at dusk in search of pennant-winged nightjars, which can often be seen around many of the lodges. Speaking of the lodges, this is Rokobo Rock Lodge, which is one of the typical lodges that we will use around Lake Mburo. It's quite a standard style of accommodation that we will use for all of our group tours. Very comfortable, lovely staff, it's very well appointed. I would say if you visited some of the very luxurious lodges in parts of southern or eastern Africa, this probably isn't quite up to that standard. You may find that the service, although always with a smile, it can be very slow at times. So as long as you've got some patience, I'm sure you will enjoy it. And as I said, these lodges are so well appointed, and I'm sure you'll enjoy that. So we will then move on to the Bwindi Impenetrable National Park, or those of us on the mammal tour will anyway. And this is really likely to be a highlight of the tour for the mammal enthusiasts amongst us. And this is the reason why: the mighty mountain gorilla. So mountain gorillas are a real conservation success story. In 2018, they were taken off the IUCN's critically endangered list as their numbers reached over 1,000 for the first time. You can only find them in Uganda, Rwanda, and the Democratic Republic of Congo. You can't visit the DRC at the moment because it's not safe to do so. So if you want to see mountain gorillas, you're going to have to head to either Uganda or Rwanda. So people often ask us how a gorilla trek works. How does the day pan out? So you will arrive at the gorilla headquarters first thing in the morning, and you'll be split into groups of up to 8 people and will be allocated your gorilla family there and then. So the groups are very roughly allocated based on perceived ability of fitness. So the very sort of strong, able-bodied amongst us might be given a group which they know will be sort of a good 6-8 hour trek away, whereas those who look like they might struggle might be given the closer gorilla families. Now, that's not to say that you should come ever expecting an easy trek. It might be that on the day that you visit, all of the gorilla families are a 6-hour trek away, so there are no easy options on that day. It might also be that a family that was previously close the evening before has moved a long distance in the night, so they are more difficult. So you must always come prepared for quite an arduous trek. People therefore ask us how fit you need to be to join a gorilla trek. And the answer to that is always very difficult for us to answer, mainly because people's sort of perceived level of fitness can vary so much from person to person. But generally, we would say if you are used to some kind of moderate daily exercise, for example, dog walking, then you should be fine. But if you have any concerns at all, please always phone us in the office and we can talk through your individual circumstances and discuss whether or not a gorilla tour might be suitable for you. So when we arrive with the gorillas, we will have one magical hour to spend with them, and it really is a completely magical experience. So gorillas share 99.9% of their DNA with humans, and we'll really get a feel for that when we're out with them. They will be interacting with each other, and you can get a sense of their intelligence and their emotions, and it really is one of the world's most incredible wildlife experiences. But because they share so much of our DNA, they're also quite susceptible to some of our diseases. So it's incredibly important that we must always maintain a distance of at least 7 meters from the gorillas at all times. You should still get some great photos, and it's still a really wonderful experience. So they might be out in a clearing, or they might be sort of back in some vegetation, as you've got here with my first gorilla trek a few years ago. We'll generally find that the silverbacks are very relaxed. They will completely ignore our presence, but the babies can be really quite inquisitive, and it can be quite difficult to maintain that 7 meter distance, but it's very important that we do so. But we'll spend a wonderful hour with them, and it really will be an hour you will never, ever forget. It's not all about the birding though. Sorry, it's not all about the gorillas. There is birding as well. So Bwindi is fantastic because it's also a location where we can find some of the Albertine Rift endemics. Now, these are a really range restricted group of birds that you can only find around sort of Uganda, Rwanda, Burundi areas. So we'll be on the lookout for red-throated alethe, Grauer's warbler, and a lot of other really star species, which are quite difficult to find elsewhere. It's also great for primates and a whole host of biodiversity, really. We'll see Laos monkeys, colobus monkeys. It's actually one of Africa's oldest forests, having survived the last ice age, so supports an incredible biodiversity of wildlife, and we'll take the time to enjoy that while we're here. We will then quickly move on to the Queen Elizabeth National Park. So this is probably Uganda's premier game reserve. It's a savanna national park, but it has lots and lots of different habitats. And this is one of the species that we will be looking for during our time in Queen Elizabeth. These are tree climbing lions. Now, tree climbing behaviour is very unusual in lions and can really only be seen here and around Arusha in Tanzania. Nobody really knows why they do it. It might be to keep away from the biting insects. It might be to get away from the heat in the trees, or it might be just to get a better vantage point. But it is very unique and it's fascinating and a lovely part of a visit to Queen Elizabeth. We'll also see lots of other species. These are Uganda cob, not quite endemic to Uganda, but we'll certainly see them in good numbers here. And we'll see plenty of other sort of typical East and Southern African wildlife. We'll see leopards, elephants, buffaloes, hippos. So they all occur. I would say if you have taken a safari in certain parts of Southern or East Africa, you might be slightly disappointed with the abundance of wildlife to be found here, which can be less than in your sort of Kenyas or Tanzanias, for example. But what Uganda does have going for it is that if you're willing to put in the work, there are far fewer tourists here, so you can have a much more exclusive safari experience. This is the Kazinga Channel, which is a real highlight for the birders amongst us. It's a natural canal that forms between Lake Edward and Lake George and is a real magnet for bird life. So on one of our afternoons in Queen Elizabeth, we will go out on one of these pelican boats for a couple of hours where we hope to see up to 80 species of birds. So those include pelicans, cormorants, kingfishers, bee-eaters, all kinds of waders and water birds. It's not just about the birds though. We will also see lots of lovely mammals on this trip. We will see elephants, buffaloes, hippos, Nile crocodiles, and it's a really lovely, relaxing way to spend one of our afternoons in Queen Elizabeth. We will then move on to the Chibali National Park, which is where we will go to see our chimpanzees. So chimpanzee trekking works in quite a similar way to gorilla trekking in that we will have to buy a permit to do it, and we will get exactly 1 hour with the chimpanzees. So although the trek to see the chimpanzees is generally a little bit easier than the one to see the gorillas, when we do get to the chimpanzees, it's a much more active experience. We will hear them a long time before we see them. They will be screeching, they are loud, they live in big groups of 30 to 100 individuals, and they'll constantly be on the move, and we'll be trying to keep up with them. So it's a really nice contrast to the sort of more sedate gorilla experience. It's also a great park for primates. We've got 11 species of primates that we can see in Chibale, such as these colobus monkeys, and we'll take some time to walk in the forests as well as in Chibale. So that takes us to the end of our standard group tour of Uganda. But for anybody who's got a bit of extra time, I would highly recommend visiting the Murchison Falls National Park. So this is actually Uganda's largest game reserve, and it is so named for the Murchison Falls, which are on the Victoria Nile. It's a gorge just 8 meters wide, and the drop is 43 meters. So the sheer force of water that comes from here is very impressive indeed. And we can take boat cruises to the bottom of the falls. We can walk to the top of the falls if we'd like to. But most of the time we'll be enjoying some further game drives. Now, Murchison Falls is Uganda's only Big Five game reserve. It's the only place we will find rhinos in Uganda, and it's also the only place we will find giraffes, such as these Rothschild's giraffe. So it really is a lovely place to end the holiday. So that's sadly all I've got time for on Uganda this evening. There's lots of other wonderful parks that we could visit. There is Kidepo up in the north, we've got Semliki to the west. We might like to spend some time in Jinja on Lake Victoria. So if you'd like to know any more about those or any of the other parks I've talked about this evening, please do pop your questions in the Q&A section and we'll answer as many as we can. But before we end, I will briefly go to Rwanda, which, as you can see here, is this tiny country in just southwest of Uganda, sorry. And these are the 3 national parks that we will visit if we are on a wildlife safari in Rwanda. So we will begin with Akagera National Park, which is Rwanda's only savanna national park. So it used to actually be much larger, but unfortunately, after the genocide in the 1990s, the park faced a lot of problems with poaching, with deforestation from the number of refugees who were displaced following that horrible incident. But thankfully, in the last few years, an organisation called African Parks have taken over Akagera and taken over the management there. And they're doing an absolutely fantastic job at reinstating the park to its former glory. They've reintroduced lions and rhinos successfully to the park. So for those of you who have done a few safari destinations and are looking for something a little bit different, spending time in Akagera and working with the researchers and conservationists is something really different, and I'd highly recommend it. So we will then head to Nyungwe, which is where we will go and see chimpanzees in Rwanda. And again, this experience is very similar to the one in Uganda. I personally found the trek slightly more difficult in Rwanda, but that may well have just been the day that I went. They can vary so much between days, these experiences, but it is exactly the same in that we will have exactly 1 hour to spend with the chimps. A lot of the time they may be up in the trees. We might just see a lot of chimpanzee bums as we're walking across, but hopefully at some point during our hour we will get to see them on the ground and get some fantastic photos of them interacting. Nyungwe is also one of the best parks of primates anywhere in Africa, really. They've got 13 species of primates. So you've got your grey-cheeked mangabe, there are silver monkeys, and we can also track habituated colobus monkeys in Nyungwe as well. And finally, we will head to the Volcanoes National Park. So this is where we will go to see gorillas in Rwanda. And people often ask us what the difference is between trekking in Rwanda and Uganda. And to be honest, there aren't huge differences between the two. One important distinction is that it's much more expensive to trek for gorillas in Rwanda. The gorilla permits actually cost $1,500, whereas in Uganda, they just cost $700. But the experience itself is very similar. You'll start the day with the gorilla headquarters being split up into your groups, and then you'll go and spend exactly 1 hour with the gorillas again. One of the main differences, however, is that you may well start a gorilla trek in Rwanda in some of this sort of cleared pastoral land which surrounds the forest, whereas in Uganda you will almost always immediately start your trek right in the heart of the forest. You will quickly get into the forest though, so that doesn't necessarily make it any easier, as your gorilla family may be well into the forest as well, and this is the kind of habitat that we'll have to make our way through. It's well worth it though for the fantastic hour that we will get to spend with the gorillas, and as I said earlier, it's very similar to the hour that we will spend with the gorillas in Uganda, but it will be one of the best hours you've ever spent in your life, so highly recommend it. Rwanda is also fantastic for birding. This is a Ruwenzori churiko. It's great in that you can see a lot of those Albertine Rift endemics that I mentioned earlier. So Rwanda is a great birding destination. This is a regal sunbird, which is another one of those very special species. So that brings me to the end of my talk on Rwanda and Uganda, my very whistle-stop tour. As I mentioned earlier, please do pass through any questions into our Q&A, but I will now pass you back to Kerry, who I believe will be taking us to a break.